Hello, hello. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you're located. All right, I'm going to sneeze really quick. Maybe. All right, hello. This is Joshua Grice. This is Fight Like Heaven Media. I might have a couple more sneezes. It's the nature of going live. It doesn't look pretty. All right. Again, this is Joshua Grice coming to you from Fight Like Heaven Media, where today, on this December 26, 2025, we're going to chat a little bit about Nigeria. Because on yesterday, Christmas night, Central Time, um, or sometime during the day of December 26th, middle of the night rather, in Nigeria, there was an attack that took place. Now, this attack, to many, was a good attack, because what are we talking about here? Well, the U.S., per authorization from President Trump, um, bombed certain specific strategic strike zones in northern Nigeria. Have not seen any updates on the casualties or the success of that strike, but that in fact did take place on Christmas night, U.S. time. And so we're going to go over today just kind of what's going on in the realm of public opinion, in the realm of statistics, history of Nigeria, and what would be the potential motivations of starting a physical escalation against an oppressive regime that has been having its way for over 20 years, and that's Boko Haram. We're going to get into it and really give both sides, or I wouldn't say it's two sides to a coin necessarily, but it's really just the world of opinions as it surrounds this issue, this topic, and a lot of the atrocities surrounding specifically the Christian genocide that is taking place in Nigeria. So what I have here is some articles, and we're gonna get right into it. Let's see, pull this up here. Excellence. All right, we're gonna start here. We're gonna start here by taking a look at a video regarding Boko Haram. So Boko Haram, in if you're not familiar, it means Western education is forbidden. Haram, speaking of forbidden. So this is a Arabic, Arabic to English translation. Western education is forbidden. So we're gonna go and kind of see who is the founder of this terrorist organization. That is an objective fact that this is an oppressive terrorist regime, and kind of hear from the horse's mouth himself, Mohammed Youssef, on his rhetoric surrounding what he considers a righteous movement. So then we have a foundation of how we can sort of analyze the nature of what is going on. So let's pull up this video here. This video was posted by BBC Africa 6 years ago. Now, Nigeria is a commonwealth of the United Kingdom, and so of Great Britain. And so as a historically, what that means is, because Nigeria, one of many dozens of other countries that have this specific status of a historical colony, via imperialism in the 20th and 19th and 18th and 17th, many centuries, that currently in today's climate, Britain would have sort of an obligation of response when it comes to de-escalating situations. That's kind of like the status quo when it comes to, um, you know, what would be considered an obligatory response. The United States also has its own, what is considered U.S. territories, where it's not an official State of the Union. But we have certain protections. We have military bases. We really treat it like an extension of the United States. And so, same thing with Nigeria. They've been dealing with this issue for over 20 years, and there has been a recent response by the United States. Social media has really highlighted it. And honestly, social media and people's collective voices is what is causing a response, um, a reaction. And it's pretty phenomenal, I must say, because we're not used to this. We're really not used to this. We have seen a lot of inaction on behalf of previous administrations, and if you're not familiar with what's going on with Epstein files, that's for another day. It's very damning, if true, even against President Trump. But on this specific front, U.S. intervention based on a collective moral do-goodism, specifically based on the targeting of Christians, in this specific case, is really unheard of, by many modern metrics. You usually have a lot of apathy and a lot of preservation. That's seen in the United Nations. That's seen globally, historically, is that things come to a certain desensitization level, and so you don't have an active response to violence. So again, let's give the little back history here so we can kind of see what we're working with. Oh, yeah. Not hearing audio. What did I do? Yeah. Oh, okay. Mm, yes, that's what it is. One second here.
How did it all
There we go.
10 years ago, a violent uprising began. Since then, it's shaken the northeast of Nigeria and neighboring countries. It's a conflict that's killed more than 30,000 people and displaced millions more. I'm talking, of course, of Boko Haram. But who are Boko Haram? And why has Nigeria's battle with them lasted over a decade? So how did it all begin? Boko Haram means Western education is forbidden. It was formed by this man, Mohammed Yusuf. He hated the West and was very critical of the government, which he saw as corrupt and un-Islamic. He set up a religious complex, including a mosque and an Islamic school in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State. He was a charismatic speaker whose followers were a mixed bag, not only some of society's poorest, but also upper class and university students who invited him to speak on campus.
They accepted the ideology, they accepted the belief of establishing a theocratic Islamic state, and all the people who joined him, even though Mohammed Yusuf was attending to their needs, he was providing some social services to them, the core reason why most of them joined is the ideology.
In July 2009, Boko Haram staged a failed uprising against the Nigerian government. 800 people were killed and many of their members arrested. Authorities thought they'd successfully crushed the group when Mohammed Yusuf was killed in police custody. But that July uprising marked the beginning of a 10-year-long battle that continues till this day. Just a year after the uprising, one of Yusuf's lieutenants, Abubakar Shekau, announced he was now the new leader of Boko Haram. The re-emergence of Boko Haram under Shekau's leadership marked one of the first times when authorities claimed to have defeated Boko Haram, only for the group to resurface. It's a pattern that would be repeated time and again over the next decade. In August 2011, Boko Haram made international headlines when it sent a car bomb into the United Nations compound in Abuja. 23 people were killed and more than 75 injured. The next few years would be some of the group's deadliest. Between 2013 and 2015, Boko Haram killed more than 11,000 people.
It was impossible to count the number of dead bodies. There were so many women, men, and children.
During that period, the group seized more and more territory, and by 2015 was in control of much of Nigeria's Borno state. It also spread its attacks beyond Nigeria's borders to neighboring Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. As people fled the terror, the UN estimates that over 2.2 million people were displaced. But Boko Haram's most notorious attacks were when they targeted schoolgirls. One night in April of 2014, students of the girls' secondary school of the northern town of Chibok were sleeping in their dormitories. But armed members of Boko Haram stormed the boarding school. They bundled 276 terrified schoolgirls together and took them away. The abduction led to global outrage. Prominent global figures asked for more to be done to free the girls.
Over 100 students are kidnapped by
Kidnap of the Chibok girls have received international planet to stand with Nigeria.
Nigerian government should have shared it.
They don't really understand Islam.
But although a number of them have been released in the last 5 years, more than 100 of the students are still missing. The Chibok incident showed Boko Haram kidnappings could bring them publicity. 4 years after Chibok, they abducted 110 schoolgirls from the town of Dapchi. Most were released a month later. But one of them, a Christian student called Leah Sharibu, remains in captivity. Her peers say she refused to give up her faith. Since 2013, more than 1,000 children have been abducted by the terror group. The Nigerian military have been criticized for their failure to free those kidnapped by Boko Haram. Low morale and corruption have left the army floundering, but Boko Haram's shifting strategy, including the use of female suicide bombers, has made them hard to pin down. In recent years, Boko Haram has fractured and split, forging new alliances and developing new tactics. In 2015, Boko Haram lost its self-proclaimed capital Gwoza to Nigerian troops. Over time, the government has taken back territory, forcing the group towards the hilly areas east of Gwoza, as well as Lake Chad and the Sambisa forest. Whilst losing territory, Abubakar Shekau looked for new international allies. He pledged allegiance to the so-called Islamic State. But IS had other ideas. A year later, it announced that the new leader of what was now known as the Islamic State West Africa province was Abu Musab al-Banawi. Remember this guy, Mohammed Yusuf, the founder of Boko Haram? Well, al-Banawi is believed to be his son. Although he keeps a low profile, there are no verified images of him. So Boko Haram was now split. Abubakar Shekau remained in control of another faction, now known as Jama'atu Ahalusunne Lil Dawa Wal Jihad, or JAS, to you and me. The Islamic State West Africa province, also known as ISWAP, has developed new tactics, focusing on winning the hearts and minds of the communities, the territory it controls.
ISWAP tactic now, it's actually is a combination of not just warfare, but it's also a combination of a state building project. So ISWAP is actually engaging in that state building project, having their own judicial system where they establish court judgment, also monitoring like economic activities, especially the fish farming, the cattle rearing, and the farming activity in the region. Now, all of these activities were not the activities that we saw from Boko Haram at the early and the nascent stage.
As IS's caliphate is lost in the Middle East, ISWAP is attempting to establish one in West Africa. If it's successful, this insurgency could be around for another decade.
All right. So you can see there. One, two, three. Testing. 1, 2, 3. There you go. All right. Sorry about that, guys. All right. Continuing on here. So, as you could really tell from that video, that video was released in July 30th, 2019. So it's been 6 years. So it was stating that Boko Haram has been around at that time for about 6 years. I've seen other reports at that point had been around for closer to 10 years, 12 years. So I'm gonna just ballpark it between 22, 23 years. That's kind of the average in terms of, because, you know, of course, when a movement goes mainstream, well, whether good or bad, it's not that they just popped up overnight. It's been sort of a fomenting, an instigation, a propagation, a buildup of rhetoric, of movement, of politicization, of power, And so that consolidation of this movement culminated under the leadership of Muhammad Yusuf. And you can see there's actually a couple of factions, meaning both are wreaking terror on the behalf of jihad, or what is considered a holy war when it comes to Muslim interpretation. Now, there's many factions of Islam, but in this particular incident, we're not going to get into the nuances of how Muslim groups operate and essentially where they're taking their collective orders from, the structure of leadership. But we're just focusing on the fact that Boko Haram, a Muslim extremist organization, has been operating not just in the country of Nigeria, but in multiple countries that surround that western region of Africa for more than a couple of decades now. And so even at that point, you saw some statistics, numbers displaced. We're talking about, tens of thousands killed. And that was literally statistics given between just the time frame of 2013 to 2015. And so over the last additional 10 years prior, and then 10 years fast forward, we're seeing some really, disturbing statistics. Here's a quick image of the founder, which kind of saw in the video, but Muhammad Yusuf. And, it's one of those things where you recognize anyone can have an opinion on something, but you heard it here from a very just for the sake of a lack of better word, neutral publication, just giving the very straightforward breakdown of this group. And they were established for that purpose. Boko Haram, Western education, anti-Western education, quote unquote, or the sort of the establishment of a political arm, a military political arm, rooted in a religious rhetoric coming from the Muslim faith for the systematic ostracization of other people who don't align with that, which is basically most people who don't want bloodshed and violence. And so, the reality is, here we are, 2025. This is the year in which Nigeria was talked about from the public office of the U.S. sitting President Trump, Donald J. Trump. And, let's take a look at a video where Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth are making declarations that the U.S. will intervene in Nigeria. And, kind of understand, based on this video, kind of where we're at now, December 2025. this is coming a few months ago, just literally like 30, 60 days ago, in terms of like this outward
crashes.
declaration.
Liability isn't always about who
now,
is driving.
the Secretary of War in the United States
for the
was
condition in
called the
which the car being
Secretary of
driven.
War at its initial founding, when the U.S. government was being set up and established and set into order after General Washington became our first U.S. president. And so since that, it was only for, if I'm not mistaken, the last 50 years or so where the U.S. Secretary of War, Department of War, was renamed the Department of Defense, essentially a PR move to really soften that title and make sure that we're not coming across as a nation of military aggression, but the Department of Defense is more of a common term in most nations. So under President Trump, in the last 12 months, has made it very, very abundantly clear we're going back to the Department of War. Our rhetoric is essentially a doctrine in which we carried in the early 20th century, which is to carry a big stick, meaning you have the ability to, use your aggression, but you speak softly, carry a big stick. So people know you have the ability to have action when it's needed, and your rhetoric though matches that of peace. Now, is that in reality? Because Trump has really declared multiple times, even a speech just last week where he made an address to the whole nation saying, hey, I ended 8 wars in my first year of presidency. Not going to get into the idiosyncrasies of that claim, but the reality is we are in an interesting precedent in terms of U.S. intervention, whether it be Venezuela, just striking boats off our coast. And then Nigeria, people are saying that, and we're going to get into it, that this was not in coordination with the Nigerian government. Definitely other reports indicate that the U.S. has been in specific collaboration with the Nigerian government, that this strike was not unilateral, but that it was done in coordination with the Nigerian government, meaning this is not just a one-off, loosey-goosey action. Okay, so let's go here, 30-second video, kind of take a look at. This is really just, we have a couple of videos to this effect. Or we might just have one. But basically, this is just social media posts. Let's kind of take a look at what this has to say here. So you see here, it says, this is Pete Hegseth posting from, I believe, Truth Social, or it could be X. Still not used to be called X instead of Twitter. But he says here, the killing of innocent Christians in Nigeria anywhere must end immediately. The Department of War is preparing for action. Either the Nigerian government protects Christians or we will kill all Islamic terrorists. And there's a whole title blocking. Okay, so, you see that rhetoric, very hard-nosed. Like, we're going to take care of business, because the Trump administration, actually from the beginning, from Trump's campaign for 2024, had led with a rhetoric and in an appeal that we are a Christian nation. And so in that, we defend Christianity in all forms and attacks. And you don't see this type of language coming from first world global powers. You do have smaller nations that specifically at this moment don't come to mind, but you've seen this rhetoric come from other nations, but without the ability to back up that rhetoric. U.S. has the most military bases in the world, is still a global force, whether you don't think that is true because of the economic weakness of our country at the moment. But in reality, the U.S. still is the global fighting force and protecting force. And so, so you see here, right here, Pete Hegseth getting very down and dirty on his rhetoric here. Here goes President Trump. This could have been a showboating type of situation. Hegseth and Trump kind of going back and forth on a public channel. This is True Social. I can see that now. He says here, Trump is saying, if the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria and may very well go into. So again, it's kind of interesting, this lower third that's blocking it, but you can see the gist of it. The killing of innocent Christians in Nigeria anywhere must end immediately. We will kill the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities. That's from Pete Hegseth's response to Trump. There you go. Really appreciate that scrolling there from Dawn News. So they're saying, Trump is saying, I'm hereby instructing the Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians. So, strike. What does that mean? What is that implying? It's meaning aerial attack, not necessarily boots on the ground. Meaning a land invasion, That's the public rhetoric. All right. So there was another video, and there isn't this, like, from what I haven't been able to find like a more straightforward video version where it's being talked about in a public forum. I thought that existed, but in reality, it's more of a generic video released months prior to Nigeria and, but prior to the public opinion and outcry reaching the ears of the president. And so that video months ago from Pete Hegseth, I don't have it, he was indicating, yeah, America is an offensive fighting force. We are not going to back down. XYZ. So what we're going to touch on, I want to get on this sort of mainstream media news pushback, essentially calling this a narrative for Trump's gain or for the U.S.'s gain. We're going to get into that. It's sort of a sensitive thing where you are accusing someone, or you're accusing the president, you're accusing the U.S. military of using the Nigeria and the Christian genocide for an excuse for invading for other reasons, meaning natural resources. Let's get into mainstream media. So this is really one of, I would say, okay, Nicki Minaj, hip hop artist and someone who's mainstream pop and hip hop. She has really, in the last couple of months, if you live under a rock and you're not on social media, you wouldn't know this, but if you've really paid attention, Nicki Minaj has really come out to be a really avid advocate and public figure when it comes to talking about these issues pertaining to Nigerian Christian genocide. So let's take a look at this video where Nicki Minaj is really being very vocal and taking a stand. This is at a United Nations in New York.
Hello, everyone. I must say I am very nervous, so please, well, thank you, Ambassador Waltz, for this invitation. It is an honor to stand on this stage with you and the other distinguished speakers here today to shine a spotlight on the deadly threat faced by thousands of Christians in Nigeria. I would like to thank President Trump for prioritizing this issue and for his leadership on the global stage in calling for urgent action to defend Christians in Nigeria, to combat extremism, and to bring a stop to violence against those who simply want to exercise their natural right to freedom of religion or belief. I stand here as a proud New Yorker with a deep sense of gratitude that we live in a country where we can freely and safely worship God regardless of one's creed, background, or politics. No group should ever be persecuted for practicing their religion, like I recently stated on social media. And we don't have to share the same beliefs in order for us to respect each other. We're way beyond thinking or expecting or assuming for, the person sitting next to you to have the exact same beliefs. We're beyond that. That's ridiculous. But that shouldn't make one person feel less safe than anyone in any room. Music has taken me around the globe. I have seen how people, no matter their language, culture, or religion, come alive when they hear a song that touches their soul. Religious freedom means we all can sing our faith regardless of who we are, where we live, and what we believe. But today, faith is under attack in way too many places. In Nigeria, Christians are being targeted, driven from their homes, and killed. Churches have been burned. Families have been torn apart, and entire communities live in fear constantly, simply because of how they pray. Sadly, this problem is not only a growing problem in Nigeria, but also in so many other countries across the world, and it demands urgent action. And I want to be clear. Protecting Christians in Nigeria is not about taking sides or dividing people. It is about uniting humanity. Nigeria is a beautiful nation with deep faith traditions and lots of beautiful barbs that I can't wait to see. When one's church, mosque, or place of worship is destroyed, everyone's heart should break just a little bit. And the foundation of the United Nations, with its core mandate to ensure peace and security, should shake. I am joined here today by peace builders, by faith leaders, by those who saw violence, saw rising intolerance, saw the threats clearly before us, and chose not to look the other way. I am inspired by their work to build interfaith ties, to see the humanity across the lines which might divide us, and to fight for security and liberty for all those who pray. I look forward to our discussion today, and I hope it will encourage deepened solidarity for us to urgently work together to ensure every person can enjoy the right to believe, to worship, and to live in peace. Barbs, I know you're somewhere listening. I love you so very much. You have been the ultimate light in my life and career for so long. I appreciate you, and I want to make it very clear once again that this isn't about taking sides. This is about standing up in the face of injustice. It's about what I've always stood for my entire career, and I will continue to stand for that. For the rest of my life, I will care if anyone, anywhere, is being persecuted for their beliefs. Thank you.
Right. So you kind of see there, from that very I would say very impactful video, because every time you have someone who affects the culture, who's on the mainstream culture, it does have the ability to cause more public response. It's just the way it is, an average person, speaking on behalf of the United Nations, just wouldn't, it just is what it is, would not have the same impact. And I honestly think Nicki Minaj contributed to an overall response from the U.S. government. Now, not to say that she was the only one. Now, for sure, this could have been on the agenda, very likely already on the agenda, on the table, in the war room, in the in the spaces in which President Trump meets with his foreign diplomats and his secretaries of war, and so the timing couldn't be more than perfect. You have the public response demanding for intervention, then the U.S. government's like, well, here I'm responding. We're responding. We're going to respond to the cries of the public. In reality, it already be in the deck of cards. That timing can definitely be up for scrutiny and analysis. But right now, what we have is a timing from, a lot of social trending towards that. Why now versus 20 years ago versus 5 years ago versus a year ago? Well, honestly, it's just the reality of how social media works. Social media has the ability to have someone in one area of the world be concerned about another area of the world instantaneously. And I think the algorithmic platform that is TikTok and Instagram, and the ways those algorithms are dialed in, there has been an interesting trend for things that affect people to impact more people simultaneously, because the algorithm, when you have, like, if you're interested in arts, if you're interested in, sports, your algorithm on your social media platforms are going to reflect that. But when you have worldwide events taking place, it's not just a subsect of the population that experiences that algorithmic targeting. You end up having a lot of people, if not everybody, understanding what's going on, being on the same page. And that's the power of social media algorithms. News media used to be that way, but when people started to be disinterested in the official narrative being spoken on behalf of just major news networks, and they want alternative media, citizen journalists, DIY research has taken the world by storm. And we're seeing a culmination of that now in 2025, where literally governments are responding to social media trends versus social media reacting to government whatever, or political orchestrations. And so very interesting time. And so we're seeing that here. Let's give some statistics, all right? So we saw the statistic of about 10,000. Now you have a myriad of statistics. So let's definitely just at least try to ballpark these numbers. We need to put things into perspective. We're so dehumanized, desensitized when it comes to global events and having a righteous concern for these things. And it's like, well, that's happening over here. What is it to me? And that rhetoric isn't just 21st century. It's literally been the rhetoric for millennia. If it's not happening to me, it's not happening, out of sight, out of mind. So what is the proper response, right? Because we're going to get into the strike that took place on Christmas Day. And then we're going to get into public opinion, specifically from one specific news source, which talks about that this is exactly just a narrative and nothing more, All right, so let me pull this up. Yes, I use chat. No, Google Gemini. So this is a good thing about using social media, AI platforms, is that they aggregate. It's not about AI synthesizing and making its own conclusions. It's really about the reality that AI, when used properly, is an aggregate that is just pulling information and consolidating it and doing comparisons, and it ends up being a good tool. So I shy away from AI in prompting and stuff in many regards. I don't like rendering images. I don't like writing emails. I never use it for proposals. I don't like it. The language is too ridiculous. It sounds definitely AI. I don't like not having my own creativity stimulated. I don't like co-laboring with the Holy Spirit to write something, to come up with something creative. It's just weird to me. But yeah, when it comes to news aggregation, I think it can be very useful, because I've seen different statistics, right? Sort of a range when it comes to these numbers. So I prompted Gemini, how many Christians have been displaced in Nigeria the last 20 years? How many have been displaced in Africa the last 20 years? So it says precise statistics for Christian displacement in Nigeria and across Africa are difficult to verify. And why is that? Because official census data often omits religious displacement. It's frequently a result of a complex mix of religious, ethnic, and economic factors. True. This is why the pushback on this being a Christian genocide is being disputed. But let's look at numbers. Okay? So displacement in Nigeria the last 20 years. Nigeria is currently considered one of the most dangerous places in the world for Christians, primarily due to insurgencies by Haram and ISWAP. Hey, that's a third organization. Hey, we had JSP. Now we have ISWAP. ISWAP, I believe, is JSP. I believe it is. So you have a couple insurgencies. Well, look at that. Fulani militias. Okay, in the Middle Belt. Okay, that's an area of Nigeria. Like, this is international Christian concern. This is what I love about Google Gemini. I don't use ChatGPT. But when it cites its sources, see, it's an aggregate. It's not just coming up with numbers. Total number of Christians displaced. See, from the International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law, Inter-Society. It's citing its sources. Good job, Google. Good job, Google Gemini. Estimated that over 5 million Christians have been displaced within Nigeria and forced into what is considered internally displaced persons camps or regional refugee camps. Tough. That is a tough deal right there. Now, look at this. It says wider impact. Some estimates suggest that 14 million people in mixed areas. Again, this is specific to Nigeria. Have been uprooted, forced to flee their specific localities, avoid violence. Crazy. 14 million. There's 109 million Christians in Nigeria, from what I understand. 109 million. It's considered the fourth highest Christian population in the world, by a country. And so 109 million Christians in Nigeria, 14 million being displaced due to war, due to oppression and aggression from JSP, from Boko Haram. Come on. That's just like saying in the United States, say there's 100 million Christians, you have the size of Texas, which is completely displaced, having to go. Sometimes we don't put numbers in perspective. We're really just like not understanding the magnitude of certain aspects. Numbers don't mean anything until you put it into context. Take a look at this statistic. It says, over the last 2 decades, it's estimated that more than 20,000 churches and Christian schools have been attacked, destroyed, or shut down, according to Genocide Watch. 20,000 churches? That is a crazy number. In the first 220 days of 2025 alone, so up until like September or sorts, there's an indication that over 7,000 Christians were killed and thousands more displaced, showing that the rate of displacement has accelerated significantly in the last 5 years. 7,000 Christians killed by Boko Haram, by JSP. Okay, now let's just kind of get wider context. Displacement in Africa last 20 years. Displacement of Christians across the continent is driven by civil wars, extremist insurgencies, and so you can see like there's civil wars still going on in Sudan, skirmishes, South Sudan, extremist insurgencies, Burkina Faso, Mali, Somalia, sectarian violence, Central African Republic, CAR, and DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. Democratic Republic of Congo. So approximately 16 million in sub-Saharan Africa have been forcibly displaced as of early 2025. Sudan, crazy place in terms of displacement. Burkina Faso, 500% increase in Christian deaths. Goodness gracious. My goodness gracious. Displacement. So we're looking at, see here, you see the numbers 5 million, 14 million. Like that's extremely different numbers, right? But let's just be conservative. We're still talking about, and this is considered here in sub-Saharan Africa. It's saying 16 million. Okay, let's just say 20 million. 20 million conservatively. Now, this here, it says global context, 1 in 5 in Africa. 1 in 5 reported persecution. Okay, see, this now makes a little bit more sense. It says there's over 36 million forcibly displaced people on the continent who are affected regardless of faith. So, meaning specific targeting of Christian communities, when, you know, because religions do tend to group together at church, Christians, you know, communities are mixed, but still, especially in certain areas, certain countries, you have more ethnically based communities. And so targeting a community can be based on religion, because, you know, this is the hot spot of where people of a certain religious orientation are going to be, and those being Islam or Christianity for the most part. Okay, so 16 million Christians displaced. That's being tracked. Why is it being tracked? Because it's literally happening in organized methodologies. And Islam is the common factor. It's the common instigator. You're not seeing secularists who are causing systematic harm to Christians. Okay, here I had the history of Boko Haram. I'm not going to get into that, but I definitely wanted to kind of move right along here. Let's move on to some good stuff. That is, I say good, but it is really tough to really get into this, but hey, we're here. So this news organization, News 24, I believe it could be a Nigerian publication. It's possible. Pretoria, Durban, and Port Elizabeth, Cape Town. Is that South Africa? Cape Town usually is South Africa. So I believe this is an African-based news organization. Let's just kind of read through this. Is there a Christian genocide or a crisis of narratives? It says here that social media influencers, public figures, and local and international faith-based organizations are amplifying claims of a Christian genocide in Nigeria. They point to the wave of attacks on churches and Christian communities across the central and northern parts of the country. In one instance, U.S. Senator Cruz said on social media platform X that Nigerian officials are ignoring and enabling the mass murder of Christians by Islamist jihadists. Cruz even introduced a bill aimed at sanctioning Nigeria for the persecution of Christians. The Nigerian government denies the claim. Minister of Information and National Orientation Muhammad Idris admits that Nigeria has security problems, but the claims of a deliberate, systematic attack on Christians is inaccurate and harmful. Security, especially in the predominantly Muslim north of the country, has been deteriorating for years. Some 10,000 people have been killed and hundreds abducted since Bola Tinubu became Nigeria's president in mid-2023. Oh, let's take a look at this video. I mean, this is very, it's just interesting rhetoric. You know, we're seeing a type of rhetoric that's like, why are you pushing this narrative? And not invalidating this at all. But
U.S. Senator Ted Cruz.
What is this type of strong language against the claim of Christian-specific genocide?
Has made claims of a Christian massacre in Nigeria.
And 4 other Republican senators have also urged the Trump administration to sanction officials and redesignate Nigeria a country of particular concern.
The Nigerian government has rejected the claims but admitted to a security problem. So what's the truth?
The claim that many Christians are dying in Nigeria and it's a genocide attack against Christians is misleading.
Nigeria is a half-Christian, half-Muslim nation that has been grappling with an insecurity crisis for more than a decade. It's a complex mix of terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, and criminality. In the country's north-central region, Christians are among those killed in farmer-herder communal violence, with layers of both ethnic and religious undertones. Churches have also been targeted in the past, and in the north, Islamist groups are waging a deadly insurgency.
The Christians in the northern parts that are affected by these insurgencies are minorities. Data is saying that there are 9 Muslims to 1 Christians who are affected by this insurgency. we discovered that more Muslims are even attacked, more Muslims are displaced, more Muslims are killed than Christians, just because of the location they're in.
So where do these narratives come from? Analysts point towards right-wing linked Christian advocacy groups from the US and locally that often cite unverified data about violence in religiously diverse countries like Nigeria.
One of the things we discovered is that many of these advocacy groups, they push out these numbers without proper finding in an attempt to push for a policy. That's first. Also another attempt to generate funds and revenue. So the main reason they push out these massive numbers is to strike an emotional chord.
Rights groups accuse the government of failing to protect people from attacks that have killed thousands. And analysts warn that false narratives about Christians being targeted will only hinder efforts to get to grips with the crisis.
And the problem with this claim is that it is pushing a narrative that will mislead actions that may help mitigate other sorts of insecurity and insurgency happening in Nigeria.
Okay, so you see that rhetoric, right? You see the rhetoric coming from folks there that are really supporting and really critical of the U.S. and specifically they call it the religious right. And so what's the point of giving pushback on, a concerted effort for intervention in Nigeria? Well, yeah, we're going to get into those criticisms and kind of why criticisms do exist of U.S. intervention. Because at face value, if you are experiencing systematic genocide, whether it be targeting Christians or just attacking people haphazardly for the sake of violence, when you have a government that is not doing anything, and then you have a country, the U.S., who is in a position to actually bring proper intervention at a systematic level and not just stop the bleeding temporarily, but bring in the ground support if needed, bring in the aerial strikes to soften those areas where strongholds exist. Wouldn't that be a good thing? I mean, reality, isn't that great? But there is a lot of pushback because what comes with it is collateral damage, meaning innocent people die because when you're just striking an area, yes, they can be precise, but you have an instigation of more violence because people are mad, scared on every facet of society, innocence, these rebel groups, Boko Haram, what's happening in real time in northern Nigeria where the strike took place. We're yet to see some sort of immediate ground reaction, but it is very tricky situation. Now, I was looking at what does the Muslim displacement look like. It says since 2005, the number of Nigerians displaced. See, there's a claim here that there's no way to tell exactly, but this other Gemini prompt based on statistical evidence that it links to, external links. This is that since 2005, let's try to bring this up here too. Since 2005, the total number of Nigerians displaced by conflict is estimated between 3.5 and 5 million. I mean, we saw 4 million, and then there was a number talking about 14. Let's just kind of stick on the reserve number of 4 million. It's a good average, I think. Stick in there for now until we have corroborated resources. Let's take a look here. It says roughly estimated 70 to 80% of these individuals are likely Muslim. Now, is that true? Because this is the population statistic. Okay. This is the population statistic. Again, another Gemini prompt here. It says that Islam makes up the majority. Again, this is Pew Research, right? This is objectively, the statistics based on religion in Nigeria. 56% are Muslim. Christian makes up about 45%. All right. So interesting that you have this other prompt. This is not even citing the sources here that says 78% of these individuals are likely Muslim. So out of most Nigerians being displaced by violence in the last 20 years, maybe estimated 70-80% are likely Muslim. It's interesting. So this is why it's saying this, because most of the conflict has been taking place in northern Nigeria. It says that areas of displacement, it says that Muslim percentage is 90%. And this is because of population concentration. Very interesting. Meaning mostly Muslim population. So therefore, if you're attacking an area, Boko Haram, in this case, then you're going to see a most specific religious group, i.e. Muslims, affected because they inhabit most of those places. And then it actually breaks this down here that you have a more mixed demographic, i.e. more Christians, even split between Christians and Muslims, in what is called the middle belt. We read that earlier in the article, the middle belt. So I'm assuming it's central Nigeria. And you see that displacement here is closer to 500,000 to million. So you can still have millions of Christians being displaced as well as Muslims. And that could be both true. And in that case, is it necessarily targeting of Christians? Now, the rhetoric of Boko Haram, it's something that is to be looked into. It's like how much of a religious anti-Christian targeting is taking place. Why would you attack people of your own religion if you are looking to get out Western influence, and Christianity is seen as a Western influence by a lot of Muslims who really see it as a very European introduction to society. It's an interesting take on that, when Christianity is a Middle Eastern religion in terms of its heritage. It took place in the Middle East. It was birthed in the Middle East. And so it being a European religion is a fallacy in terms of history. But so you see this. This is good. It's good to get into the nuances of what's going on, because it's not about trying to support a specific narrative. Personally, I'm Christian, so don't want it either way. I don't want Christian persecution. I don't want Muslim persecution. It's not about being right or wrong in this regard. We're just analyzing the facts here. But you can kind of see that news article is basing itself on what it believes to be true. Surprisingly, no statistics were given. So you had a statistician on there who was debunking claims but didn't give any statistics. I think that's kind of a journalistic laziness, honestly. I mean, bring statistics. If you're going to claim something is false, then counteract it. That makes sense to me. All right, so let's get into the ground zero. Literally, prior to this, there was another article I found which was saying U.S. Forming along the Nigerian north, maybe, especially when you're trying to strategize a game plan, you can do this over the phone, of course, through secure communications. But if there's not a ground invasion or a ground sort of deployment of troops, there was one report from a Nigerian news source that said the U.S. was physically present in there. Hadn't seen it anywhere else, so I didn't want to report on it because it's like, well, it's just one report. So, but here you go. Just 2 weeks later, from December 17th to December 25th. Actually, I do have that article. Let's take a look here and read. So this was just from a couple weeks ago. It says U.S. Air Force takes over Benin, Nigeria border airspace, bombs terrorists' armories. Interesting. So you have this from a couple weeks ago, and then December 25th, it's like the very first thing ever. 200 soldiers from Nigeria, Ivory Coast step up in peace missions in Benin Republic. The United States Air Force is presently operating above the Babana crossing used by armed groups for smuggling supplies. So there's the border of Nigeria. It says they stepped up reconnaissance and massive attack against militants begin to operate now and blasting the armory of the terrorists. So it's just very interesting because it's like this was stated, but we just didn't see any reports on it from President Trump. Now it's very interesting because this is very detailed. We're talking a breakdown of how many personnel was sent, the cooperation between the border country of Benin and Nigeria participating. So there's cooperation. There you go. There's government cooperation has been taking place. So you see that straight away. No doubt about that, right? So let's now get into the article which talks about the U.S.'s invasion. Now, I think I had that pulled up, or not invasion. I'm sorry, the strike. Let's pull this up here. Okay, this is from earlier
US
today from CNN. Just discussing that reality of the U.S.'s direct attack. And everything's vertical format. I find that very interesting.
The U.S. launched a strike on...
One second here. Oops.
What President Trump says are Islamic State terrorists persecuting Christians in Nigeria. Nigeria approved these military strikes on ISIS targets, but the two countries have very different reasons for the attack. President Trump says the Christmas night attacks were against Islamist terrorists who primarily target innocent Christians, but the Nigerian government disagrees. Nigeria says terrorism is a regional security issue that targets both Christians and Muslims, and it has no religious angle. Now, the U.S. and Nigeria coordinated these strikes, and the foreign minister, Yusuf Tugar, told CNN what happened.
It was a collaborative effort between Nigeria and the U.S., and President Tinubu gave the go-ahead before it took place, and we don't see it violating our sovereignty or territorial integrity, which is very important. And it is not about religion, it's about the protection of lives and property of Nigerians and our neighbors as well.
It's hard to know exact numbers of Christian and Muslim victims, but Nigeria's population is evenly split between the two religions. A few days ago, a suicide bomber was blamed for an explosion inside a mosque, but there have also been recent kidnaps and killings that have targeted Christians in the country's north. Nigeria's foreign minister pointing out that in the Sahel, where most of the population is Muslim, they have suffered the most from these attacks. The foreign minister did not say if Nigeria would allow U.S. troops on the ground. President Trump has previously threatened to go into Nigeria guns a-blazing to neutralize these terrorists that he blames for the systematic killings of Nigerian Christians.
Did this take...
Okay, so yeah, it's from a perspective that I'm coming from personally. You know, we're seeing this, we're seeing the official sort of angle from President Trump, We're seeing the news reports, and it can feel like it's splitting hairs here, because clearly, one, the Nigerian government had officially, the president of Nigeria had no issue with U.S.'s intervention, coordinated, approved attack, and so that is a really good aspect of what happened on December 25th. It wasn't unilateral, was not taken without its chain of command in respect to the country. So, like I said, splitting hairs here, you have the U.S.'s angle and in the Christian sort of narrative, and then you have Nigeria's is coming straight there from a cabinet member of the Nigerian government saying, yes, this attack took place, and by the way, this is not to save just Christian Nigerians, but this is to really intervene on behalf of all. And yes, in the northern areas, we saw that statistically on the Gemini statistics, that in northern Nigeria, the states in which attacks are taking place is majority Muslim. Now, this is the reality. They went anecdotally into very specific attacks in recent times where a Muslim mosque was attacked, and then also Christians were targeted. So why are we having a conversation of, is this Christian specific? And if it's not, ultimately it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter, because human beings have value. But I think this is where we get into the meat and potatoes of this rhetoric, because you are seeing that there might be external motivations. So if you're saying we're saving Christians from genocide, that's very compelling for a very large percentage of the U.S. population, which is of the Christian faith. You have full American support over issues regarding to saving the oppressed. And especially when it shares the faith of their fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. And so if you lead with the PR that, hey, oh, by the way, there's other motives, you don't have someone's support. You don't, because it then becomes about other things. And that's just an interesting bottom line that we live in. America is suffering tremendously in terms of almost inevitable economic collapse due to the hyperinflation of the U.S. dollar, which hasn't seen the real effects, but we're starting to see the beginnings of what could be a major depression in our country. And so to intervene on a foreign nation is really tough in terms of public opinion supporting that, because we can't take care of our homeland in terms of unemployment, in terms of wages, in terms of cost of living, and 50-year mortgages, 50-year car loans, and things of that nature, sending billions and billions and billions of dollars in foreign aid to other countries, and our taxes are just growing. And the moral obligation and duty to intervene in cases of religious genocide is one of the exceptions to those rules. Americans, by and large, are very, very philanthropic. We're the most giving nations in the world privately, private donations. The U.S. outshines every other nation combined when it comes to personal giving and almsgiving and donations. It just doesn't, no country comes second to the United States. Come close to the United States on that. And so could this be weaponized, sort of language to really appeal to a Christian base? That is to be determined. But let's look at this here. Let's look at Nigeria and the fact that it is really rich in uranium. We're gonna look at two articles. One is in regards to uranium, and the other is in regards to oil, natural resources. So let's see here.
French companies that were mining the uranium were paying the government 80 cents a kilo for the uranium. The French companies that were mining the uranium were paying the government 80 cents a kilo for the uranium, and then turning around and selling the uranium to the rest of the world at 200 euros a kilo. So that one move from the Nigerian government to say we are now going to take ownership of our own uranium, they went from realizing about $1 billion in uranium resources to over 300 billion a year. Do you realize what I'm talking about? No amount of NGO could bring that kind of money.
Okay. That's a very... testing. That's a very quick soundbite that really doesn't necessarily cover the issue with what's being, you know, for layman's terms, right? It was kind of like a lot of numbers thrown out. So let's get into the statistics about uranium when it in terms of Nigeria.
Because what being Jewish isn't Israel. Judaism has existed for 4,000 years. This is a country for 75 years. I grew up a Zionist, and we were told
what's going on in Nigeria, but it's just being critical in a good way. So Nigeria's uranium market, the effect of recent high impact. Okay. Let's pull this up here. Trying to get the multiple screens going. Okay, so Niger. Okay, so this is one of the things. So Niger, its neighboring country, the seventh largest amount of uranium in the world. Nigeria has its own uranium sector, which is still in exploration phase. So Nigeria has a relatively small, but estimated 200 tons of uranium. Now, that statistic might have been confused with the Niger. Not necessarily an Africa expert here, but let's get into let's get into oil production in Nigeria. There's a video here on amount of oil that's produced. It says that Nigeria's oil reserves reached 37.20 billion barrels. This is April 2025. So there is a surge of oil production in Nigeria. So combined with Libya, Nigeria, and Algeria, Africa's oil reserves there. So Nigeria is second in all of Africa in terms of oil reserves. So just trailing behind Libya and ahead of Algeria. Libya is ahead by 10 billion barrels. Nigeria it's about 37 billion that we said, and Algeria is about 12 billion. So you have a high production of oil coming from Nigeria in terms of oil, and then you have developments of uranium, which if you're not familiar. If you're not familiar, so uranium is primarily used as fuel in nuclear power generation, in the production of nuclear weapons, and it is used for medical industrial applications. But specifically for nuclear power generation, we have an issue right now globally, which particularly in the U.S. and China, which is how are we going to power these AI servers? There's a lot of power consumption that's needed, and so in order to do that, you have coal-fired plants. You've got our nuclear powered facilities, and then you have plasma-based power, which is some not to talk about today, but there was a couple of people leading in that industry who were killed recently, who were in the breakthroughs in terms of new types of alternative energies. So it's crazy timing. But you have uranium here, which is used for, again, in the energy field. And so uranium is a very, coveted element. Now, in the case of Nigeria, there is not going to be any public record in terms of that. This is the reason why U.S. is starting to focus its energy on Nigeria. It is very true that Christians have been systematically oppressed in Nigeria. It is also true that Muslims have been targeted as well. It is very true that Boko Haram is an anti-Western organization, very much about extremist in its interpretations of Islam being the takeover of as an ethno-religion. And so you have clear rhetoric from, these extremist groups that want nothing to do with anyone or anything that doesn't look like them. And so you're seeing Nigeria is just one of the many countries, but Nigeria is highlighted because of the sheer numbers of displacement. And so we're at the very early stages here in terms of what is considered this conflict. And so a lot of developments are going to continue to take place, and we're going to really see what to expect and really what is the real scope of what's going on as we kind of get closer to sort of the reports coming out of these initial steps taken in terms of these strikes. Do we see a positive response? Do we see Boko Haram contained? Do we see ground elements, ground troops that are taking care of business on the ground, where you definitely minimize collateral damage and you have the highest, the highest precision in terms of your attack? We'll really see what's going on there, and prayerfully, you start to see really of movement in terms of like people themselves who are taking a stand. If anyone is afflicted, if your neighbor is going through persecution, regardless of religion, it is a Christian right and responsibility for you to fend for the hopeless. And if you're the one that's being attacked too, courage in the midst of the fire. And so as Western Christians, we are not used to seeing bloodshed and battle on our own soil. It hasn't taken place in many, many, many decades. Many, not in my generation, not in my parents' generation. You can go back 200 years to the Civil War, 150 years to the Civil War when we last saw bloodshed on our own soil. And so, I do believe that there's going to be a greater spiritual awakening because the times are very serious. There's always been conflict. There's always been bloodshed. In any year, any generation, there's name it. There's been conflict. But I think the importance of today and 2025, coming into 2026, is global awareness of conflict, on the humanity of it all, and then also like intercession and prayer, and really partnering with how the Lord wants to handle these things. The time of ignorance has passed, and so as a society, there is a great awakening that's taking place, spiritual awakening, and it doesn't mean God is just going to put everything on autopilot. That means that we have an assignment, whether it's a platform, whether it is financial resources, lobbying, spiritually, prayer, intercession. But there's a lot taking place to really see things through. So praying for Nigeria, praying for the Congo, praying for all of Africa, praying for the world. And, as we come into 2026, really seeking God's face, and really staying and abiding in Him. So you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thanks for staying tuned today on the Fight Like Heaven.